What do Lehman Brothers, GM and Enron all have in common? They all went bankrupt. All wildly different circumstances, of course, but they all went bankrupt, and Batchwell is about to do the same. If you've never heard of Batchwell, that's fine, and to be honest, doesn't really matter. This video will teach you some really important things about how to spot a struggling company regardless. Batchwell are a New Zealand-based kombucha company in the premium sector, meaning they batch brew all their kombucha, which gives it that more authentic feel and helps maximize the amount of good bacteria in it compared to commercially brewed kombucha, which is often full of sugar and preservatives and not quite so much of the good stuff. They're doing a private equity offering to raise between 700,000 and 1 million New Zealand dollars, giving the company a pre-money valuation of $2.3 million. You can check them out on snowballeffect.co.nz. We'll look at the pros and cons first, then we'll have a look at the financial position of the company, and then we'll wrap it up with my hot take and a bit of a conclusion, what you should think of the company. We'll start with the cons so that we can end on a good note. The first one, obviously their financials aren't in a good state. I'm not going to talk about that now because I'm going to have a whole section about that. So we'll talk about that later, but they are very cash poor and it would seem as though they're about to go belly up, but we'll talk about that a bit more later. Number two is their ability to scale, and it seems like a bit of a silly one considering they've been scaling just fine and keeping up with demand and all that good stuff. But for the next 3 years, they expect to almost double their compound annual growth rate from 63% to 113%. Putting aside the fact that that forecast is incredibly bullish and may not even happen, we have to consider that everything they produce is batch brewed in 10-litre jars. It's part of what they do, and when you are doubling your production rate every single year, that's going to get out of hand very quickly. The very nature of their production process is that it's very labour intensive and time consuming. It can take between 1 and 3 weeks to brew each batch, but it's their unique selling point, so they can't change it, they have to go through it, they just have to deal with it somehow, and it could very well slow them down in these higher levels of growth. Number three, is kombucha a fad? There's limited scientific evidence around the actual health benefits of kombucha. Some studies suggest it may have similar benefits to probiotic supplements, and then there's the other side where it's had adverse effects on people's stomachs. When your entire brand is so tightly linked to the health trend, you better hope that the health trend has some longevity. In kombucha's case, maybe not. If you're investing in a company though, does maybe cut it. Number four, they like being small. Reading through their information memorandum, you get the sense they like being a small company, and their branding is all based around that, which is fine, and it's a great business model, but it doesn't leave heaps of room for growth in later years. Of course, there are some great things about the company that I really like. The first being they've got a part ownership in a distribution company called Nudes. The thing I really like about this is that other owners are all like-minded companies, not in the exact same niche either. The companies are Six Barrel Soda, Chia Sisters, and For the Better Good. They also work with Otis, Oat Milk, and a few others. Having a distribution company is crucial because their main competitors have well-established networks, the first being Karma Drinks. You might have heard of them if you're from New Zealand, but they're right throughout the country, so they'll have lots of contracts. And the second main competitor is Good Buzz. Not so much the company themselves, but who they've partnered with, which is Lion. They basically own the alcohol industry in New Zealand, and they're making moves in the non-alcoholic sector. So it's a really good thing that they have a part ownership in a distribution company to compete with these big ones. The second pro is that they can launch new products. They recently launched a new flavour, ginger and turmeric, and they've managed to launch an alcohol brand called Bloom during the pandemic, which is performing quite well, $122,000 in sales in its first year. This is important because a lot of their growth going forward relies on releasing new products. So the fact that they can execute on that is really, really important. Another pro is where they're going to put the money from this equity raise. So the minimum amount they'll raise is $700,000 NZ if they get to that point, and they're going to put it towards hiring new people in marketing and distribution, developing new products, buying new equipment for expansion, and increasing their working capital account. All good growth-orientated uses of their money. If you remember back to the My Food Bag IPO, going public for them was more about a founder's exit strategy. They didn't put the money towards growth, and well, look where it's got them. Let's look at the exciting part, the financials, and this is where it gets really concerning for Batchwell, because they don't have much money and they're not profitable either. For a company that's only been operating for 5 years, they've managed to rack up a whopping $750,000 in losses, which works out to be $150,000 a year. That may not seem like a lot in the grand scheme of things, but that represents 121% of their current annual revenue. So why are they wanting money? Two numbers tell us a lot. It's their bank account and their total equity account. The first is very dry, their bank account, and the other is negative. Negative equity is a bit of a concern. It tells us they're losing money, but we already knew that from their retained earnings, so that's not really a surprise. But it also tells us that the founders have run out of money. See, if the founders had any money left personally, they would have invested it into the company to make the balance sheet look more appealing to new investors when they do this private offering. But they haven't, and that follows on to why they're doing this private offering. Now, the next bit is purely speculation, and I want to make that clear before I start. My line of thinking as to what has led them to doing this private offering is this. They went to the banks, probably not that long ago, probably start of this year, say. The bank said, absolutely not, we're not giving you any more money. We've already lent you about over $200,000. You're not getting any more because the chances of you paying that loan back are slim to none. Batchwell realised they're about to run out of money. They've got $11,000 in the bank and they're losing 80 grand a year. So what do? They do an equity raise. They have to bring on more investors. They couldn't raise debt, so they have to raise equity. This is by no means uncommon. There are plenty of successful companies that have gone through this exact same process and come out the other side absolutely fine. Some are still going through it, like Uber for example. But the difference between Batchwell and Uber is Uber has market dominance and a heck of a lot of IP. Batchwell aren't unique, and they don't really have any IP either. Sure, they produce a premium product, but there's nothing stopping another company coming along and copying literally everything they do. They're a small player in a big game, and they certainly weren't the first to bottle kombucha. If their forecasts hold up and the kombucha industry continues to grow, maybe this could be a solid investment. But from my point of view, the production process isn't scalable, there's limited upside potential in the premium kombucha industry, and the risk of them never even turning a profit is just too great. Maybe they could carve out a nice niche for themselves and continue to grow steadily and turn a profit. I could see that happening potentially, but even then you've got to look at the opportunity cost of your investment. You'd be better off putting your money in another asset that doesn't carry the same level of risk and returns the same, if not more, than Batchwell would. Hey guys, if you like that video, you'll like this one. YouTube recommended it just for you, you lucky little thing.